Good evening. I'm going to call to order the March 19th meeting of the Joint Town Council and Parking Authority. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinsky.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor Steve Rice.
Here. Tonight we're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by, as is our tradition, a future leader in the town of Los Gatos. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Steele Johnson. He's a third grader at Blossom Hill Elementary School. He plays chess in a chess academy called Chess Wizards and likes attending Lego camp. What third grader doesn't like Lego camp? His favorite subjects in school are reading and math. He's currently reading Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and he completed the previous books in the 2nd grade. In Cub Scouts, he participates in the Cub Scout food drive, and the goal for each scout is to collect an equal weight of food to the child's weight, and Steele succeeded in bringing in 70 pounds of food. He also participated in the Cub Scout popcorn sales and sold over $625 worth of popcorn, which included over $100 in donations of popcorn to be sent in care packages to our military troops overseas. Very cool. He plays tennis and soccer, basketball, and also likes swimming. His interests include hip-hop dancing, and until recently, Steele has been taking hip-hop dance lessons at the Capitol Dance in San Jose. Now it's just a good hobby. If music is playing, he can't stop dancing. He hopes to be as good a dancer as Michael Jackson was one day. Steele, why don't you come on up? Let's give him a hand.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's give Steele a big hand. And one more time. Thank you very much, Jill. Let's give him a hand. All right. Next is our closed session report. Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. The council met in closed session tonight. They took no action, and there's nothing to report out this evening.
Thank you. Two requests of the audience. Number one, if you wish to speak on an item on tonight's agenda, in front of you is, in the back of the row in front, is a little buff card that looks like this. If you would fill those out and specify which item you wish to speak on, then you can turn those in to the clerk on my left, your right, and we'll get you in order for speaking. Second of all, please turn off or put on mute any cell phones. Thank you. Next is council and manager matters. Council matters first. Seeing none, I just have one quick one, which I'll remind everybody that my second Meet the Mayor session will be this Saturday from 2 to 4 in the library conference room, and you're welcome to come speak with the mayor on any topic of your choice. And I will be holding office hours there. Next, manager matters.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, several quick items. First, we have the first month statistics for the new library. We have 1,600 new card holders as of February 11th through March 10th. We have 4,000 reference inquiries, including online and all the desks. We've had 41,000 visitors to the library over those 30 days, and there's been 49,000 items checked out. And basically, all of these are double or more than double the equivalent period a year ago. So our new library is continuing to bring them in. If you build it, they will come. And they are. Second, last Wednesday, the mayor and I had the good fortune and pleasure of going to Sacramento to watch Police Chief Scott Seaman be installed as president of the California Police Chiefs Association. This is testament to not only the chief's leadership, but to the reputation and quality of Los Gatos and its police services. And along that line, I would like to introduce two officers who are with us tonight. Officer Glenn Young, who is in Los Gatos leadership and is required to attend a council meeting to graduate from the Los Gatos leadership program. And also newly reinstated Corporal Aaron Lunsford, who is with us tonight. Just wanted to introduce the community to both of them. Continuing, we have our next West Valley CERT class starting. This is to learn emergency preparedness and response on a series of Thursday night training sessions and one Saturday morning. The next class starts Thursday, April 26th, and residents can sign up on the Los Gatos Town website by just searching CERT, C-E-R-T. And last, we have our new art installation in the gallery, coordinated by curator Jade Bradbury and the Arts and Culture Commission. This is our annual photographic exhibit. This one's called Photographic Exposures, Photographic Moments of People and Places, put together by the Los Gatos Saratoga Camera Club. And the opening reception is this Thursday, March 22nd, from 6 to 8 p.m. That concludes staff report at this time.
Do we have a Did You Know tonight?
Is there a representative of the rec department here? Sorry. Tonight's Did You Know will be an update on the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation and Education Department. Thank you. I was looking for Steve, and you didn't look like Steve.
I was wondering who you were looking for. Hi. Let me introduce myself. I'm Janet Sumter, supervisor with Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation. And I'm not new to this department. I've been with the agency 28 years. I'm the old man on the block with this agency. But my new job is as the senior center director. So that's coming up anew. And this is, I'm here to talk about the senior programs. And you can see on the bullets here that we have enrichment programs for age 55 plus. Over a couple hundred classes are available just for the adult programs alone, and we are continually expanding that program. We have a cleanup service day, April 6th, where we have 18 volunteers, adult volunteers, which is excellent, to come to the senior center and spend a day on projects. That's the Beam Corporation. And they've volunteered to do all sorts of cleanup and things for us over there at the senior program, at that building, the Adult Recreation Center. Very, very pleased to get them. And the Town Parks Department, of course, is helping us with the projects and seeing what we can do to get things spruced up. Resource Fair, April 12th. We're in partnership with San Jose State University teachers and students, which has been excellent for us. The Health Place, they brought so many programs to the adult community as far as free services for health and education, and they've been wonderful. They're there every Thursday, and so it's a practicum for the students, and they've been absolutely wonderful to us. And we have a lot of local senior service providers available. Like I said, I've only been a week doing this particular job. I'm over the years done clubhouse programs and all the youth programs and brochure coordination. So our brochure for spring just came out. So if this is what we look at, like if you are living in Los Gatos or Saratoga, we hand this out. And we are under the education code. So I'm the adult education administrator for the high school district also in this district. So thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the consent calendar, before we have any items pulled or not pulled, I'm going to look to the manager. We have a number of desk items on the consent calendar.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have 2 desk items before you tonight dealing with multiple items. First is on the minutes, which is item number 1 on the consent calendar. We have 2 changes to the minutes. One is to incorporate changes requested in an email from Mrs. Quintana, and the other is a modification to the vision statement for the North 40 to recognize that the North 40 will address the town's residential and/or commercial unmet needs, which was the direction from council instead of the word previously in the minutes of accommodate. We also have a desk item that is just clarification for item number 2 on your agenda, dealing with the agreement for architectural consultants for the town. So staff would recommend you incorporate the changes provided in the desk item for item number 1, dealing with the minutes of the prior council meeting.
Great. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, does any council member wish to pull an item this evening? Seeing none, does any member of the public wish to pull an item on the consent agenda? And I see none. I'll look for a motion. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Move to approve the consent calendar with the modifications contained on our desk item for item 4 and item 8.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is verbal communications. This is an opportunity for anybody to speak on any item that is not on tonight's agenda for up to 3 minutes. Hopefully you'll have a chance to fill out a card. I have 3 already, and you have time to fill out another one if you would like to speak. Again, this is for items not on this evening's agenda. First card that I have is for Jonathan Knowles.
Mr. Mayor, I believe all 3 are actually 4 items that are on agenda. If you prefer, we'd be happy to wait until you're ready to speak to item number 8.
If they're regarding item number 8, I think we have to. So,
Okay, all 3 I believe are.
I'm going to call just to make sure. Next is Beth Gendricks. And is it Macy Klein? Kalen. Macy Kalen? Okay. Any other verbal communications? Seeing none, we'll move on to other business, which will start with item number 7 on our agenda. And we have a desk item for this as well. And we'll start with the staff report from Joel Paulson.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Rice, council members, ladies and gentlemen. In 1983, the town entered into an agreement for the disposition of the property at what's known now as 612 West Parr Avenue. An ordinance was adopted to allow for the construction of 107 senior residential units. One of the provisions in the agreements and ordinance require that prior to any transfer or sale, that the council make a finding that the new purchaser can fulfill the obligations of the developer in the agreements. So it's already been amended once in 1989 when Villa Vasona Limited transferred to PMG. PMG is currently looking to transfer the property to Highlands Property Development, and so therefore tonight we're looking for adoption of a resolution making a finding that Highlands is willing and able to fulfill the obligations of the agreement as a developer, and also to authorize the town manager to negotiate a couple modifications that the purchaser is proposing. Those modifications and or any new agreement will come back to the council for consideration and action. The town retained Seifel Consulting to do a due diligence review of Highland Properties so that they could provide the town with information regarding the proposed purchaser. Seifel concluded that Highland Property Development has both the experience and financial capacity necessary to continue providing the housing services and meet the town's expectations for the affordability, upkeep, and management of the property. The 2 requests for modifications that Highland is currently requesting are, one, they're looking to be a tax-exempt nonprofit entity, and currently the agreement requires them to pay property taxes. The current property owner pays property taxes, so they're going to request an exemption for property tax payments. And the second request is that the agreements have an option for the town to repurchase the property in 65 years, which currently is the year 2054. And they're wanting the town to consider releasing that option and removing it from the agreements. Both of those issues need further review, and so staff will negotiate with the new purchaser and then also bring in Seifel to do some more review and analysis to make sure that those arrangements are appropriate from the town's perspective. So staff recommends that the council adopt the resolution contained in the staff report, finding that Highland Property Development is willing and able to fulfill those obligations, and also authorize the town manager to negotiate a new agreement, which will come back to the council for consideration and action at a later date. And that concludes staff's report. Staff's available for questions. Paul Paterno and Gary Downs from Highland Property Development are also available to answer any questions. And there is also, as you mentioned, a desk item for this matter.
Okay, open it up first for questions of staff from council. Seeing none, this is a public hearing, so if, I guess it would be a representative from Highland.
They're available to answer questions. Should the council have any?
Seeing none, does anybody else? I have no cards on this item. Does anybody wish to speak to it? You can fill out a card later. Seeing none, you're all here for something. I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for any other questions or a motion. Councilmember Brzezinski.
I just want to make sure that we've clarified that the desk item has been accommodated by the staff recommendation, and that what we're doing tonight basically says to the manager, you can go negotiate and come back to us for approval.
That's correct.
All right. Then I would like to make a motion to adopt the resolution that is contained in Attachment 7, finding that Highland Property Development is willing and able to fulfill the obligations, and give the manager negotiation authorization.
So motion, is there a second? Second. Second by the Vice Mayor. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda is item number 8 regarding off-leash dog parks. Would you like the mic? And we'll look to staff for this as Todd Capurso, but I guess Christy Walter is going to give our staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'd like to start the presentation off this evening with a quick overview of our park system. We have 14 parks in Los Gatos. Dogs are currently allowed in all of our parks, but they must be on leash at all times and under the control of the owner. These parks provide a variety of amenities to our residents and local neighbors, and they also provide facilities for our sports groups and for the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Department. Recognizing that we do not have a dedicated off-leash dog park facility, the town did contribute funds to the construction of the Los Gatos Creek County Park. That park is located approximately 5 miles from downtown Los Gatos. A bit of history on this particular item. Over the last several years, the use of our parks for off-leash dog use has increased. This has been an area of growing interest from the community, and in 2009 the item was brought to the Parks Commission for discussion, at which time the staff recommended exploring a pilot project. At that time, the current Parks Commission decided not to support that pilot program, citing primarily safety concerns as well as conflicts of use for the park facilities. The unofficial use of off-leash areas has been increasing over the last few years. They're primarily focused in 3 to 4 of our parks, but we do see it throughout the park system. On February 6th of this year, the council directed staff to bring this topic to council in March for discussion. And on the very next night at the Parks Commission meeting, the Parks Commission recommended that staff develop a proposal for an implementation plan for an off-leash dog use area pilot. Since the time of those two meetings, staff has spent quite a bit of time talking to other local jurisdictions that do operate some form of off-leash area. We have found that local cities have opted to do one of three things. Some have dedicated dog park facilities with fenced areas. Some have unfenced off-leash areas or dedicated hours for such use. And some have simply decided to refer their residents to other local cities that have such areas. We have gotten a great deal of feedback from the cities that have either implemented programs or are in a pilot process, and gotten quite a bit of feedback about their programs. Overall, there's been a lot of success with these programs. We have gotten some feedback about fenced implementations leading to increased turf damage. And we've also had some feedback that would suggest that unfenced areas would not only decrease that potential for turf damage, but also allow for more flexibility in use of particular areas. Staff recommends that before we proceed with an actual pilot process that would, or pilot program, excuse me, that would change the park use, that we follow our established community process that we would use for any other change in park use. We would like to suggest a community meeting where we would invite both the neighbors of the proposed parks as well as the park users to review a suggested proposal and provide input so that we could gain consensus from the surrounding neighborhood. We would notify the adjacent neighbors and user groups through both postings in the parks as well as mailers to the surrounding neighborhoods. And we would make sure that, again, we would get the word out to all of the areas that may be impacted by any of those changes in use. Although the details of a proposed pilot would be worked out through that community process, we would like to consider some proposal guidelines that we would use in developing any pilot. The first is that we would like to suggest that parks be selected for this particular pilot. The best selection process for that would be to look at parks where the existing use patterns, the layouts of the parks, and the demonstrated demand for off-leash areas is established and makes sense. Staff recommends looking at limited hours or days, so selected morning or evening hours, and potentially selected days or a rotating schedule. And the use of self-enforcement through posted rules, as well as utilizing existing licensing programs in lieu of creating a program to certify or license use for off-leash areas. Our proposed timeline begins today with this status update. We would like to propose a community meeting in mid-April. This would allow us time to notice the neighbors and, again, the users of the parks. We would then propose to return to the Parks Commission in mid-May with a more formal or more developed proposal, and return to Council on June 4th with a recommended implementation plan. So our recommendation this evening is to accept the staff report on the status of potential dog off-leash areas in town parks, to direct staff to evaluate options for a dog off-leash pilot program and conduct a public process, and to direct staff to provide an implementation plan for dog off-leash pilot program to council no later than June 4th, 2012.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might add, Parks and Public Works had originally proposed accelerating the schedule by a couple of weeks to come to your May 21st meeting, but I let them know that was not possible because that's our annual budget hearing. And that evening we tend to devote exclusively to budget matters. It was not possible to accelerate the schedule even further to come forward to your May meeting or your first meeting in May after both the community forum as well as a Parks and Commission meeting, which took us back to the June 4th being the first available meeting to bring back a recommendation that's been heard by the community through a community forum and the Parks Commission.
Thank you.
That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions of staff? Councilmember Brzezinski?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Walter, would you clarify the licensing program component that you're talking about? If I understood correctly, you're looking at not increasing any form of oversight from a licensing perspective, but what would then the licensing program that you're looking at consist of?
It has been suggested that we follow programs that other agencies have looked at to create a special license for the use of off-leash areas, and we are recommending that part of the rules that we would establish would be that the dogs would be licensed under the current licensing program for licensing a pet, but not create a special process that would create additional staff burden and time to implement.
And then I would assume there'd be some form of random check to see if the dogs off leash in our parks are indeed licensed through the normal county processes.
That is one area that we could look into. That would be something that we could implement with our limited staffing, and we would also depend on some of the self-policing to assist us with that.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. Other than enthusiasm from the community, or at least part of the community, is there a reason why staff is even talking about an accelerated schedule, or why it's so quick with a no later than June date? And the reason I'm asking is, first of all, my experience is anytime we talk about any change in our parks in Los Gatos, whether it's putting a piece of art in Bachman or doing anything with the tennis courts in Blossom Hill or putting a skate park anywhere, there is tremendous amount of interest, and it seems really fast.
We do feel that there's an increasing interest in making some sort of decision around pursuing a pilot program. We do feel very strongly that we should follow a public process and make sure that we have community input, and we're balancing those two things. This was the most accelerated timeline that we felt comfortable with to meet that goal.
Okay, I'll have more to say on that later. Thank you.
I have two questions myself. One is, if you could go back to the slide on the timeline. The second bullet of mid-April, conduct a community meeting, that leads me to believe there's one planned.
That is our intention, is to select some parks that might work and provide one community meeting to discuss all of those parks at the same time.
Following on what Councilmember McNutt says, I have a feeling either you're going to need to do more than one, or you're going to be there a very late night. Has anything been built into the time frame that would allow you to do more than one?
It is possible that we could, in that same time frame, conduct multiple meetings. I think we would still be trying to look at a mid-May Parks Commission meeting, so we would have to take that into consideration, but it's certainly something that we could consider.
Because my concern is you're talking about 4 different parks from different parts of the town, and you're going to have a lot of input, and I'm just going to put that out as a word to the wise, so to speak, that you may need either more time or more meetings. The second question I have has to do with, once a pilot program starts, do you build in, because I'm not familiar with this, but do you build into the pilot program the potential for, if something happens and you need to shut down the pilot or something like that in a hurry, are there procedures for that? And if so, how is that normally dealt with?
We would definitely incorporate that as a possibility. We would look to first investigate what the issue is, and if we make a determination that we needed to cease a pilot, we would do whatever notification we could to the surrounding neighborhood as well as within the park to notify users that that pilot had ceased.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions of staff? Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to know if this pilot program was going to be limited to Los Gatos residents only, or is it going to be open to a greater community?
Following with the goal of limiting the resources required to implement the program, although we haven't officially discussed this yet, I think staff would recommend that we do not restrict it necessarily to Los Gatos residents. However, it is also not our intention to publicize it greatly.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, I have 3 cards. We'll open up the public hearing, and we'll start with Jonathan Knowles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Just to be clear, I am here tonight not as a person who has an off-leash dog, because my dog is not off-leash under voice control and wouldn't be able to comply with the rules. But I am a person who lives within 300 feet of one of the parks, and I'm a person who brings my dog out and about. And I'm here tonight to support mostly the staff recommendations for what we're doing, because I think it's the right thing to do for our dogs. It's the right thing to do for our community. My dog, who's not an off-leash dog, will be better off if I know that there are certain rules. Because let's face it, to your point earlier, Council Member McNutt, about the timeline, this is happening now. People are doing it now. They're going to continue to do it. They're going to do it regardless of what happens here, I fear, because there's no way that the town can have enough resources to keep up with them. They're just too highly organized. So let's put some rules around it and act responsibly on this. There are others here tonight who will be speaking to you who are people who have dogs and participate in this. I'd like to just remind you, I think all of you, I received a copy of this letter as well from her, spoke with Pam Warren myself today. She sent a letter to council and I think to staff outlining some of her feelings on this. And I think the bottom line is we know that accommodating dogs and their owners, it's been shown to lead that dog owners will comply with the relevant laws more so when communities do adopt these kinds of things. The thing I would like to suggest is, to your point, Mr. Mayor, instead of another Parks Commission gathering, maybe there's multiple meetings with the different communities involved in the pilot program. My observation as a resident is that we've gone through Parks Commission as their advisory board who's worked with council, and I'd love to really see this dialogue be between the community and feedback into staff, into council at this point and move it forward. So that's just my opinion. And finally, with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask that you, rather than have a whole lot of folks come up and spend 3 minutes each talking here, we've talked amongst ourselves and we've thought it'd be great for you to simply ask the question of the audience, how many people here are here tonight in support of the recommendations from the staff? If you choose not to do that, they would be happy to fill out cards and come on up, but they're ready, willing, and able to do that should you decide to do so. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions for me, I'm ready to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Knowles? I don't think it's really within my purview to ask people to raise hands. However, if you wish to
I would love
have
to jump
people that were supporting your point of view, I believe you still had a few seconds left, and it would probably make life much easier on all of us.
How many of you are here tonight in support of the staff recommendation for off-leash recreation for the dogs in Los Gatos? Okay.
Now we know why people are here.
I smiled when you asked that question of the audience earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles. Next on the list is Beth Gendricks.
Hi, I'm Beth Gendricks, and I've lived near Bachman Park for many years, and I have a dog, and I do go there. I've been going for about 4 years. We have a little group that meets, and
Ms. Gendricks, could you just pull the microphone down a little bit? Thank you.
we have a group that meets, and things have gone well. And I would just ask that the town council approve the staff report for a trial. I would like to have a little attention placed on licensing or permitting. I do see a potential issue that if it isn't controlled in some way, that we'll have a lot of people coming into a small park. I think that area has been vague on purpose. It needs to be vague, but at some point it needs to be tightened up, that we have a way to register the dogs, and maybe a proof of residency would be my concern. And in any case, I thank you for going forward with this and giving it consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay there for a question. Thank you. Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you. So can you tell me, when you say you want to limit the number of dogs, are you thinking that, for example, there would be a permit for, I'll pick a number, 100 dogs would have off-leash capability at Bachman Park? Would be the first 100 people that register and get that permit?
No, I wouldn't think of it that way because of the nature of people generally can't make it. It's just really nice to be able to drop in at a certain hour or a certain day. If we knew that there was an assigned time, that I think it would allow everybody to be more functional. That way, if there were people who didn't want to be there that hour, if there was dogs off leash, then they could say, I'll just go an hour later. But my feeling is that that when you are a homeowner and a taxpayer in Los Gatos, you have certain rights and certain things. And the one wonderful thing about the way the groups are meeting now is that they're neighbors. They're just people who walk from their home across the street or a few blocks. They stay for 20 minutes and they leave. And I think I would be concerned if people were getting in cars and driving from other cities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Macy Kalin and friend.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Council, fellow majority dog owners, I think. My name is Macy Kalin, born and raised in Los Gatos, now living with my husband. This is my son, Colton. So I'm a mother and a dog owner and soon to be a mother again. And I'm here to support what the staff is proposing. I am off-leash dog, especially selfishly right now because it's hard to get my dog some exercise. I don't run with him anymore or walk with him as much just because it's getting harder. But the group of us that meets down there are really responsible as far as the behavior of all the dogs and really picking up their waste. I think it's great. It's fun though. I think it's great for the dogs, obviously, but I think it's great for the community and the people who are involved as well. So I'm just here in support of the initiative, but happy to answer questions if you have any.
Any questions from Ms. Kalin? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
That's all the cards I have. I'll give one last call. If anybody wishes to fill out a card, you can fill it out afterwards if you wish to come to the mic. And I'm seeing none. I'll close the public hearing and look to council for any questions or a motion. Councilmember McNutt.
So I have a question possibly of our attorney. Is it possible for us to ask a member of the audience to come forward and answer a question from council who's not voluntarily stepped forward? And should I tell you who I want?
You could invite a member of the public to come forward and see if they would make themselves available to council for a question, but it would certainly have to be on a voluntary basis if council believes that it would be helpful.
So, Mr. Mayor, I wonder if you would consider reopening the public portion, since our Parks Commission chair is here tonight, to get his point of view on the idea of whether or not there is an advantage to going back to Parks Commission a second time, or whether that would be better time spent in additional community meetings.
Well, I certainly think that any information that we can get in our possession that we don't currently have is helpful. So I'll reopen the public hearing and invite the chair of the Parks Commission, Rob Rennie, to come forward, if he is so willing.
I'm trying to think of an answer to the question very quickly. As chair of the Parks Commission, I'm flexible for it to go either way. I think a lot of what the Parks Commission will want to do is ensure that there's a rigorous public process, and substituting an extra public meeting in place of the Parks Commission meeting seems like it would advance that. At the last Parks Commission meeting, we advanced, we wanted staff to go ahead with a recommendation. I think members of the Parks Commission were still thinking they would get to hear and make more comments on that recommendation. Without a Parks Commission meeting, they wouldn't be able to do that. So I'm kind of in the middle on this one. It may be. I also agree that we do want to solve the problem sooner. I mean, it's kind of come to head with lots of people asking for it and frustration with the rangers, like, do I enforce this? And there's too many people to enforce it. And putting some of the rules in place that will help people that don't have dogs understand what's going on and maybe what hours they can go and so forth. So I also think, a fairly crisp timeline is a good idea. So I'm a little bit on the fence which way to go, but I think an extra community meeting instead of Parks Commission could be okay. I don't know how well I answered the question, but.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Town Manager?
I just wanted to add the comment that any Parks Commission meeting would indeed be a public meeting as well, and that's where staff recommendation would go forward to actually be reviewed by public comment as well as the commissioners before it comes to council. It is likely that at the community meeting in mid-April, it's not that staff will be saying, here's the proposal and all its details. That's a scoping session to engage the community, the neighbors, the people who want off-leash dog areas in a discussion about what would work and how would it work. We generally, at the staff level, view commissions as the ideal opportunity to first vet a formal recommendation on its way to the council. And indeed, it is a public meeting where people would be encouraged to come and speak to the matter. And in fact, we would probably keep a sign-in list for any community meeting that's held and notify all those individuals of when the matter is going to the Parks Commission as a formal recommendation, so that if they wish to provide further comment in response to a specific recommendation, they could.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rennie.
Thank you.
Did you have somebody else you wanted to invite up? No. Okay. Then I will go ahead and close the public hearing again, and then look to council for questions, comments. Councilmember McNutt.
Please don't be offended. I invite you all up, but I think we're keep moving this along. I had just a couple of comments before if someone's moving forward on this, and that is I am really concerned about making sure that the community does have an opportunity to have input on this, again, based on past experience here with our parks and other communities when this topic has come up. And so picking a time in April, I'm not sure when school vacation is in April, but making sure you avoid that week. And we do have another council meeting in June. So I'm a little bothered by the no later than June 4th. That seems to be setting up an arbitrary pressure on getting the community dialogue completed by a certain time. So if we can have some diligence on making sure that the community is really aware of this. The Parks Commission last time was the day after council talked about it. It snuck up on everybody. Tonight's meeting hasn't been, terribly well publicized, and it's only talking about process. So maybe there won't be a lot of comment, but I don't want people to feel like something's been pushed through in some kind of strange way other than our normal process. So those would be my comments if council is looking to move forward with this.
Okay. Did I see Mr. Capurso?
Yes, I just wanted to add on to the timeline discussion. Having heard the comments from council and from those speaking tonight, the interesting dynamic that happened last time back in February is that the Parks Commission meets the day after council, which does a lot of interesting things to our agendas. Part of this timeline actually that takes up a fair amount of time is the fact that we need to call together a special Parks Commission meeting that would have to be appropriately noticed, and an agenda would have to be prepared. If we were able to take advantage of the June 5th Parks Commission meeting
and we could use that mid-May date for a second and possibly even third if we needed, because we could program 2 or 3 community meetings in between mid-April and mid-May, return to the Parks Commission on Tuesday, June 5th, come back to council on June 18th. We would only be about 2 weeks, actually would be exactly 2 weeks off the schedule, and I think we could accommodate all of the concerns that have been expressed tonight.
I'll speak for myself. I like that idea. Any other questions, comments? Council, Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. Comments at this point, hopefully addressing issues that have been raised up here at the dais and by the speakers. With regard to a lot of the questions that have been asked, licensing, things like that, I see that as something that will be developed during the process. What staff is recommending is a process that there be community input, and from that community input a pilot program be developed, and that pilot program then be effected for months, if not a year. That's where you will get the input as to what will ultimately occur. What is occurring right now is unstable. You have laws in our town that you can't have your dogs off leash. What you have going on, and at least 4 and maybe more of our parks, are that community members are meeting maybe once or twice a day and letting their dogs run off leash. That makes it uncomfortable for those people who have to enforce the laws of the town of Los Gatos. And then when they go to enforce those laws, it makes it uncomfortable for our residents who are, let's face it, breaking the law. And so I do not personally see a process where we have community input and then a public a trial period that goes on for almost a year as being too fast in this unstable situation I think we're in right now. With regard to the other parks that staff has already looked into, I know one of them, San Carlos, had exactly the same situation we did. They were ticketing their residents. The residents were breaking the law, and so San Carlos now has a pilot program up and running. How about that? Up and running, and so far it is successful. And then with regard to the number of meetings, in reading the staff report, I saw that the Parks Commission at their meeting concluded with a process whereby the Parks Commissioners could send emails to Mr. Capurso giving further input. I think that's one way to possibly address further Parks Commission input. With regard to whether we have 3 or 4 different neighborhood meetings or one larger meeting, I would defer to staff on that. And with regard to the duration of the meeting, it's going to have to go late into the night. I think that could very well, at staff's discretion or recommendation, be a daytime meeting and not have those kind of nighttime limitations.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first of all, I think what we're asked to do tonight is fairly general. In an issue that I think is going to be somewhat controversial. And I say that only because of the recent experience with the city of Cupertino. What seemed like when they were initiating a dogs off leash program, it appeared benign at the start, and then once it went to the public hearings, it became very controversial, probably one of the most controversial things that the city of Cupertino has ever engaged in. I don't assume that's going to be what we're experiencing, but I want to reinforce Councilwoman McNutt's concerns about the public hearings and the opportunity for people to have their say. The folks who use the parks who are not dog individuals may have some things to say. Some people have already indicated that if they live near Bachman or Rinconada or Live Oak Manor, that there are some issues. Whether they're real or kind of fantasy is yet to be determined. But for me, I think it's really important that this public process be done thoroughly. I looked at the proposal, as was indicated by Mr. Capurso, related to that June meeting of the Parks Commission. The next council meeting would be the last council meeting before we go dark in July, which means that if at that meeting we were interested in continuing for purposes of further clarification, and then that would take us right on through summer before we had a chance to look again. So I think there is some significance to the June 4th meeting. But I would say that it's really important between now and then that the outreach to the neighborhoods be very thoroughgoing, and that I can't see just one community meeting as being sufficient, the reason being that people may not be available on a particular night. And I would really like to see all of this vetted before it gets to council, so that people have their chance to speak, rather than find themselves in here the night of with the concerns that could have been raised had we been more flexible in our offerings for public participation. I think one of the other issues is, how do you determine who is going to be one of the individuals who is able to bring his or her dog to a park off leash? Because I'm a firm believer, as a dog person, that it's the dog owner who's the most difficult to deal with if we have an out-of-control situation. And it's the responsibility of the dog owner to know what his or her dog can do, how they can relate to their social environment, how they can relate to kids, and be responsible to restrain that off-leash privilege if their dog cannot act appropriately off-leash. And we know we've all had situations where it just takes one individual who violates to make everything a problem. So I would say that it's going to be important for us to take a look at this licensing program, and at the same time be cognizant of the fact that we're considered a dog-friendly community. We're considered probably the most dog-friendly community in Northern California, right after Carmel. I think probably we're better than Carmel, frankly. But what happens to us then when someone wants to come into this community because they know Los Gatos is dog-friendly and happens to one of our parks? Do we say, you can't come in? So from the question of the usage, I think we're going to have to look carefully at that. I think we're going to have to look carefully at how restrictive we think we can be. I know that if we said, well, okay, it's the Belgados neighborhood or it's the Rinconada Park neighborhood. Well, at what point in time do our rangers become the gatekeepers to make sure that everyone has a license or everyone is appropriately, within our town boundary? So I think it's going to be an issue has to deal with. I don't think we're trying to solve any of those questions tonight, but I think we need to make sure that the questions are on the table. I think there's an issue of liability. Once we open to off-leash dog opportunities, what is the liability that the town engages in as a result of that? There may be none, but I think it's a question that needs to be raised. I do think that that it's a definite amenity for our community to be able to have dogs off leash, but I do think we need to make sure that when we do this, we do it right. And so I'm very pleased to make the motion to recommend what the staff has put in front of us, but I would make that only if we've completed discussion.
Further discussion. I'm going to address something the Vice Mayor said, which I had caught and then missed, with regards to the suggestion that where the Parks Commission could email Director Capurso with thoughts and comments. To me, that was unacceptable from the perspective of we try to run open meetings and we want to have public input. And when you have something like that going on behind the scenes, even if it's completely benign and just for additional comment, I think it's not being as open and transparent as we try and be in these matters. I will look for other discussion, but my thinking at the moment on the staff recommendations is that I'm more or less okay with what I see here because it is a process oriented, but I'm more comfortable with that date being June 18th for them to come back, which allows that June 5th Parks Commission meeting to occur, and that gives, even though it's only 2 weeks, it gives a lot more flexibility in the timeline for public input. So that's where I am. Any other comments? Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also agree with the June 18th meeting, and I think it is important to have probably 3 public meetings in different neighborhoods, especially those areas where the off-leash hours are being considered, and that the public be properly noticed within 500 feet. So that's it.
Vice Mayor Spector.
If I might, Mr. Mayor, thank you. A question of staff.
Please.
The June 4th date is made sense to me. I think for the same reason Mr. Przinski mentioned, which is that that would allow time to move forward while we are not having anything or no council meetings in July. Whereas if we had it come back to us at the end of June, our second meeting in June, and if there was something that we needed to deal with, we would have to wait till August. And so, you know, for that reason, I was ready to support June 4th, but I'm certainly also willing to hear what staff has to say on that timing issue.
If I can jump right in, and then Christy and Todd can add. Certainly if it's no later than June 18th, and if we find the community process and the Parks Commission meeting goes smoothly, we may still be back on June 4th. And we could certainly update the council as well as the Parks Commission after the first community meeting with kind of a realistic expectation. I do think we'd have to start planning now for the number of public meetings, because if we wait till the first one, there won't be enough time to schedule, notice, mail to everybody, pull the database off to do a second or a third without pushing the schedule. So I would ask the council to give staff discretion to schedule 2 or 3 community forums plus a Parks Commission meeting. And it's the Parks Commission we may target a special meeting, knowing we have the fallback to June 5th if need be, and then the fallback to council on June 18th. I do want to defer to Christy or Todd. If we wanted 2 to 3 community meetings, is that possible prior to a special Parks Commission meeting if we start now?
My short answer would be no, because it's really a function of how we're going to conduct the meeting. If we're going to have 3 separate meetings and do them on more of a geographical basis, I'm not sure that we will be able to resolve each neighborhood's issue in one meeting. I foresee a process where we will have to have kind of a more at-large approach, and we may spend different sections of the meeting talking about areas at each geographic area. Much like what we did on the sports park master planning process, is we can go ahead and program in 2 or 3 dates ranging in that mid-April to mid-May timeframe, because that's really the most difficult part. Is if you plan on one at a time, you always need to build in at least 3 weeks before you can get the next one adequately noticed. So if we can do these approximately 2 weeks apart, programming in 3, and kind of the worst case scenario of having 3 meetings is that we probably wouldn't be back to council until June 18th. But if we were able to resolve the issue in less than that, it's very likely that we could come back in June 4th. So I think, as the town manager is alluding to, it's what we're kind of heading toward here is more of a flexible schedule that would be determined by how many community meetings it takes us to adequately address the issues and the concerns being raised in such a way that we can put together a proposal that makes sense for the town residents and our park users. So I think where we may be headed is just to kind of remove the explicit date on June and just say that we'll come back to council in June. We'll come back. We'll certainly come back on June 4th if we're ready, but if we need the additional time, we would come back 2 weeks later.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, I'll look to council for further discussion or a motion. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. All right, having listened to staff, I'm going to move to accept the staff report on the status of potential dog off-leash areas in town parks, direct staff to evaluate options for a dog off-leash pilot program and conduct a public input process, and direct staff to provide an implementation plan for a dog off-leash pilot program to council in June of 2012.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any discussion, council members, or Vice Mayor Spector?
Thank you. I was first, people first talked to me about a dog off-leash area in 2004, and as I think Mr. Knowles pointed out, since that time, the number of dogs that people own in our town seems to have grown exponentially. But what I know has grown are the number of people who come to our town as the destination area with their dog, and who eat in our outdoor restaurants and who go to our stores. And I agree with Mr. Przinski. We're better than Carmel. And so I obviously am supporting this motion. And I'm actually thankful that we're moving forward, because I think the blinking one's eyes at breaking the law is an unstable situation that we shouldn't be facing.
Further discussion? Councilmember Przinski.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I want to second what the Vice Mayor just said, and keep in mind that what we're looking for is an extremely positive outcome, which means a thoroughgoing analysis of options. It means coming up with a game plan that really makes sense, and that we don't stumble out of the gate and find ourselves in the middle of a pilot with a negative experience, which is going to actually be counter-indicated for what we're attempting to do tonight. That this has to be a very strong pilot that we're looking at. I think we have to do ongoing evaluation, which I assume will be built in as the program is put in place. But, to look at all the factors, to rely on our Parks Commission and their role in making sure that before it gets to council, it's been vetted completely, and to offer the opportunities for these 3 parks that we've identified to make specific comments, because I do think that if you look at each of those neighborhoods, Bachman and La Rinconada and Live Oak Manor, they're distinct neighborhoods. And you have individuals who live around those parks who are going to have very different experiences and very different expectations. And we may find that one park is very amenable to dogs off leash and another park is not. And I think that what we need to do is be somewhat strategic in how we analyze the input, because I would not want what is viable in one park but not in another to kind of eliminate the possibility of our taking the park that's positive and allowing that to occur. So I think there's a lot of work in front of you as our staff and the community, and I don't want you to see this as an impossible task, but I do think we need to completely vet this before we get back to our June meeting. And so I'm going to support the motion.
Other comments? Councilmember Leonardis?
Just have a question for staff. I agree with everything that's been said up here this evening, but my main concern is that if we have these community meetings, that all stakeholders will be properly notified and be able to attend if they choose to. So I guess the question is, how are we going to notify the surrounding neighborhoods to those parks?
Our proposal is to use our standard notification process, which is 300 feet from the selected parks, as well as posting in the parks themselves to try to capture some of the users that may be from outside of that neighborhood.
Would it be possible to go up to 500 feet on the notification? 300 feet sometimes might be a little bit too close in a neighborhood park.
That is possible.
Thank you.
And I'm going to add, this is a public process that's going to come forward, and it is a proposal to change the utilization of some significant town resources, our parks, and I would personally encourage any member of the public who has any interest in this to make sure you attend one of the public meetings. There's going to be more than one of them, and they will be noticed, and I'm sure they'll be on the town's website, and we want to hear all points of view. Everybody's perspective is important and equally valid, so please make sure that you get your feelings registered on this. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I have nothing else on our agenda for this evening, so we are adjourned.